We're operating in a world where security is paramount. You need resilience. You need to look to those countries where you have common values, and you need to reinforce them. The first way we do that as Canadians is we become an essential trading partner of the United States.
Hello and welcome to GZERO World. I'm Ian Bremmer, and today we are taking a hard look at three of America's closest allies: France, Britain, and our nice big neighbor to the north. Yes, I'm talking about you, Canada, all three on the verge of transformational political change. And when you put together these snapshots of political turmoil and then add the United States to the mix, you get a broader story about a West in disarray. How do these political changes impact our ability to confront some of the world's biggest challenges like war in Europe and the Middle East, the AI revolution, and climate change? My guest today, one of Canada's most interesting men. Sorry, Jim Carrey. He's on the short list to become the country's next prime minister. Holds the unique distinction of having led the central banks in both Canada and England. He's also the United Nations Special Envoy for Climate Action and Finance and has a lot to say about this moment in politics and how it could literally impact the future of the planet. The two of us recently caught up in Toronto. But first, you know that stereotype about Americans being self-absorbed and ignorant of the world around them? Well, I find it to be as offensive as it is true. Take, for example, this viral clip of a British comedian asking Americans about the UK's current prime minister.
I'm asking New Yorkers what they think of Rishi Sunak.
Of who? Of who?
I would probably say like a chef.
But Americans would do well to tune into the heaping pile of shepherd's pie that is British politics right now. In late May, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, yeah, now you know who he is, stepped up to a rain-soaked lectern in front of 10 Downing Street to call for snap parliamentary elections on July the 4th.
Now is the moment for Britain to choose its future, to decide whether we want to build on the progress we have made or risk going back to square one with no plan and no certainty.
Political analysts and opposition members agree that Sunak's Tory party faces humiliation at the polls and will lose government control to the opposition Labour Party for the first time in 14 years. Voters are fed up with scandals under former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, as well as a sky-high cost of living, a flailing National Health Service, and an ongoing migrant crisis. In short, Britain is facing a political sea change not seen since Brexit, and it's one that even the hapless Labour Party cannot help but capitalize on. I wish I could say things are better across the channel, but French President Emmanuel Macron is facing his own political catastrophe. Earlier this month, far-right candidates strongly outperformed in France's European parliamentary elections, and right after results came in, the French president shocked his country by immediately calling for snap elections in late June and early July. He's betting that French voters will choose his governing coalition over that of far-right opposition leader Marine Le Pen.
J'ai confiance dans nos compatriotes. Je pense que les Françaises et les Français sont intelligents, voient ce qui est cohérent, ce qui ne l'est pas, savent faire la différence entre exprimer une colère et avoir un projet de sérieux, ont un idéal. Donc je ne crois pas du tout que le pire puisse advenir.
And closer to home, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's polling numbers are reaching lows that even U.S. President Biden would have a problem with. Voters are tired of Trudeau's Liberal Party after 3 scandal-ridden terms in power and after years of sluggish economic growth. In recent polls, Trudeau trails Conservative opposition leader and populist firebrand Pierre Poilievre by 20 points. And although Trudeau technically still has over a year until he's forced to call an election, once he does so, it's likely to be a grisly affair. But getting back to that ugly, if accurate, American stereotype, why should we care? Isn't the U.S. election in November the one that decides the fate of the world? Well, yes and no. In many respects, the U.S., of course, is the global leader, but only because of its alliances with Western democracies, not by itself. If those allies are mired in their own political turmoil, it opens the door for adversaries like China and Russia to step in. It also means that key global priorities like combating climate change get harder and harder and harder to accomplish. To discuss all this and more, I'm joined now by that Canadian of all trades, Mark Carney. Here's our conversation from Toronto. Mark Carney, it's really good to see you.
It's great to be here, Ian.
So lots to talk about you today. I think of you as a climate guy.
Yeah.
But let's start with Europe, because you and I know each other well from your UK central banking days.
Yes, the quieter time.
Yes, and Brexit was not easy to manage. A lot of people consider it one of the biggest own goals. Do you now see Emmanuel Macron, after getting absolutely thumped, his party, historically so, in the European parliamentary elections, immediately calls a snap election for his parliament? Very dangerous thing to do. Is that on par with what Cameron pulled by saying, I want to do a Brexit vote?
Well, I think first, you have parliamentary elections and you have parliament for a period of time, and then you have other elections. That's different from when you have a referendum, in-out referendum, and a decision is taken. And you see, for example, in the UK election right now, basically Brexit is not being discussed, because the decision was taken and it's viewed as irrevocable. We'll see over the fullness of time. I think what President Macron did, and you'd have a view on this, is he wants to know what the French people want for their government. As we all know, that sometimes in voting for European elections, you vote for a variety of things. It can be a protest vote, it can be specific things at the European level, it can be directional, whatever. He'll get a bigger turnout, he'll get a very clear mandate for those who come into Parliament, and then he will work with whatever the French people deliver.
But it is possible, of course, that the French people, and yes, it's a parliamentary vote, it's different from Europe, but I mean, if they return Le Pen's party with a majority, they become prime minister in the French government. I mean, that's not just a France issue, that's an EU issue.
Well, France is an important part of Europe, but France is not Europe, and the system has an ability to bring in different perspectives. I think in the end, what the president wants to do, and he's clear about this, is to hear what the French people want, and he has proven time and time again. I'm an admirer of his. He's proven time and time again an ability to work with a wide range of partners. So we'll see what kind of partner he gets in the election.
So I heard you also say, and you just teased it, but you said, look, Brexit is not being discussed right now in the UK election. It's not a part of it. So we'll see in the fullness of time. Labour's expected to win in a big way coming up, and certainly no surprise there. But assuming that occurs, do you think that there are bits of Brexit that will be recalibrated in terms of the EU relationship?
It's not clear. There are a wide range of aspects of the UK-European relationship which don't work. There's massive red tape, for example, in agricultural products, massive red tape and delays at the border, the inner workings of a very interconnected financial system, for example. There's just inefficiencies. I'll give you another example. To go to climate, the ETS, which is the carbon market, it used to be one big liquid carbon market. Now you have two markets. The UK market's smaller, it's more volatile, there's more uncertainty about investment. It doesn't really make sense. So there's a range of things that could be made better if the UK government and the European government wanted to work together. And it's all operating in a GZERO world. You saw this coming, but this is now a reality. And the question is, looking out in this world, who are the more like-minded partners? One of the assumptions, or the assertions underpinning Brexit, was that there was going to be an old, open, global, liberal economic order where the UK could, boldly go forth and strike trade deals with China and other emerging economies. I said, well, that's not the geopolitics today.
So you talked a bit about climate, and I want to use the European conversation to move us there, because it's not that the Europeans don't care about climate anymore, but security and migration have become much more urgent issues, and the Greens have underperformed in Europe as a consequence of this. What are the practical implications we are likely to see? Let's start with Europe for being able to continue to advance a transition energy agenda.
Yeah, so I think, look, it's significant, the result. That's part of the reason why we have elections. But I think we also need to put it in broader context and zoom out from individual countries, France particularly, look at Europe as a whole. For example, if you look at the next president of the European Commission, I think it's fair to say that, the European People's Party, largest party, President von der Leyen, she will now need support from the Greens in order to get over the hurdles. So that provides some balance to the overall balance of climate policy. That's the first thing. Second thing is we're operating in a world of heightened importance of security, but also of national competitiveness. We will soon see the report from Mario Draghi on European competitiveness. And to paraphrase what he said is, the world's changed radically. There are some regions that are manipulating the system for their advantage, and there's others, i.e. China, that are trying to make us permanently dependent on them. We, Europe, need to recognize that and build out industries, and he starts with industries in and around climate, clean energy, as where European strengths are. So it becomes an economic, national security and European competitiveness issue, and that will help drive much of it. Now, to draw to specifics, what may be on the table, I think there'll be questions about the ban on internal combustion engines, the moratorium after 2035, the exact timing of that. There is unlikely to be significant additional money at the European level for climate, those solidarity funds, which have been quite important, for example, to Italy. But it probably reinforces on trade policy so that embodied carbon, to use the phrase of John Podesta, you see the US headed in this direction as well, that becomes one of the key elements of market access.
Let's move to the United States.
Yeah.
And on the one hand, I mean, Biden has been a president that has promoted a climate agenda, and it was a big piece of the Inflation Reduction Act. At the same time, the U.S. today is the largest producer of fossil fuels in the world. We just saw a big announcement, a big piece of the $18 billion tariff against China is a 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles. Yeah. You look at all of this, and how do you feel about the role the world's largest economy is playing in an energy transition?
Well, I think you're optimizing or working towards several objectives here
that are not necessarily completely overlapping.
But they can be aligned. We are going to be using fossil fuels for the next quarter century and beyond. And the question is, where are those going to come from? Are they going to be low cost, low risk, in other words, political jurisdictions, and low carbon? And so the U.S. it's low cost. It's low risk politically and relatively low carbon. It can get lower carbon, and some of the biggest U.S. energy companies have signed up, for example, to zero methane by 2030 pledges, which is consistent with that. So that's where you get the alignment on conventional fuels. I think more broadly, the U.S. is looking to build up domestic industries. Industrial policy, sometimes it's for climate reasons, other times it's for economic reasons, and the tariffs on China reflect a desire partially to de-risk that relationship, but principally to develop domestic wind, solar, domestic hydrogen, first and foremost. Now, that's an investment or a bet that the United States can make. I'm not sure it's one that all jurisdictions can.
So let's move to Canada.
Yeah.
So Canada relationship with the United States frequently been talked about historically as an afterthought. It's friendly. Nobody really cares about it.
We care about the U.S.
Well,
just to be clear.
But increasingly the Americans care about the Canadians. I mean, my experience here this time around, relationship is becoming more strategic. You agree with that?
I agree with that. Yes.
And what are the ways you think that's manifesting?
Well, I think, historically it's been longest undefended border, common values, look at our people on your TV, that kind of approach from Canada. And I think there's a slow awakening. I think it needs to speed up, to be honest. We better not hit the snooze button on this. Slow awakening of the fundamental strategic aspect of the relationship. We're operating in a world where security is paramount. You need resilience. You need to look to those countries where you have common values, and you need to reinforce them. The first way we do that as Canadians is we become an essential trading partner of the United States. In other words, we're providing things to the United States that from a strategic perspective, the U.S. absolutely needs. So what does it need? It needs clean energy. We've been talking about that in size. It needs critical metals and minerals from a reliable supplier. It's essential to the ultimate success of that whole industrial strategy around clean energy. I think as well what it needs is a reliable partner in the backbone of artificial intelligence. Just the scale of development there, you need clean power for that. You need the right regulatory framework, you need the right values, you need reliable people, you need cyber defenses, all things that Canada can bring. And it's going to sound odd, but even the United States needs capital. And we have some of the most sophisticated institutional investors in the world, and they bring smarts, they bring expertise, particularly in infrastructure investing, which is what the U.S. is just in the very early stages of. You could call it an infrastructure boom. It's an infrastructure era, really, is what's going to happen the next couple of decades in the U.S. and I think in Canada as well. It's going to be about building out the new infrastructure. We can provide all of that. And if we're providing all that, if we're working towards providing that, it's going to make the U.S. stronger, it's going to make the relationship stronger, and it will bring a series of other benefits to both of us.
So I know you wouldn't necessarily mind being prime minister in the future. If there were a Carney administration, how would it differ from what Canada's seen in recent years?
Whoever, over the course of the next decade, I think this is a decisive decade very much for Canada. We have a massive opportunity in Canada. We can be part of the solution for the U.S., but gain huge benefits for all Canadians as a consequence of that. So I think an even greater focus on that relationship and a focus on execution. I mean, this is about tens and tens, ultimately hundreds of billions of dollars of investment that needs to happen over the course of a very short period of time. So I think first and foremost, in and around that. I think as well, we have some huge domestic responsibilities here. We need to build 6 million homes over the course of the next 10 years. We need to build 6 million homes. That's what we need to do. We need to ramp up from our...
Housing prices are just way too high right now. People are very angry about
prices,
it.
And rightly so. Prices, availability, the quality of homes, there's a right way and wrong way to do it, but we've got to execute against that. So again, a real focus on tangible delivery. I think that's one of the things that we need to do. We need to get much better at delivering for Canadians, delivering for our allies. And then the last thing, I mean, there's many other things, but the last thing I'll emphasize for this is, look, anytime you have these big transformations, climate, AI transformation of the global economy, it brings opportunities, but opportunities for people who have skills. And so we need to provide Canadians on a huge scale the opportunity to retrain. And it's massively exciting. At a moment like this, if I can get the skills to participate in, to master the machine, if you will, on the AI side, fantastic. It's empowering. If I'm just sitting there with my existing skills today, it's massively threatening. And so this is a fork in the road. We have a choice on that, and our governments need to align with that.
Mark Carney, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me in.
That's our show this week. Come back next week, and if you like what you've seen, or even if you don't, we just want to hold some more elections, we'll create some. But first, you got to take a moment to sign up for our most excellent daily newsletter. It's appropriately titled GZERO Daily.